Hi, I'm Max Feinstein, and I'm here with my good buddy and engineer, Jake Sachs. He mixed and mastered Betamax, and we're here to talk about Drone. Drone is the first song on Betamax, and I'll start out with a little bit of the history of it. The song started out with actually the end of it, the third movement, being the introduction to another song, to Sprats. And after a little bit of time sitting with that, I realized that that was an incredibly long-winded intro and could probably end up being its own song. So I wrote a song around it. There's the octave part and the kind of the Hendrixy flourishes at the end of the song. That's where all that came from. So I just decided to front load that, make it its own song. The influence of it, I was listening to a lot of Devin Townsend at the time, and so the idea of having this sort of trudge with a lot of swirling and heavy guitars was very appealing. It wasn't really until I recorded it, I wrote the thing, I don't know, 5 years ago, but it wasn't until I actually sat and recorded the song that that I came up with the lyrics and the concept relevant to where I was at the time. A lot of the engineering was actually done by me. I engineered my guitars and the bass and the keyboards, as I'm sure you can tell because most of those levels are just fucking floored. But and the noise too. The drums were engineered by John Roccasano, and all of the recording took place at Silver Horse Sound, mostly between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m.
Nice.
Well, it's that kind of song. It's a song essentially, and in an interview with Coos, I described it as kind of a panic attack in a park. That's like all the noise and stuff. It sort of represents just the ambient shit around you that you might not be looking at, but you might hear. Dog walking by, you hear the jingling of the leash and all that stuff. And this is all not necessarily going into what the song's about, but just sort of this weird, abstract, and viscerally cinematic way that I try and look at music and how it relates to your existence in everyday life. So, for you, I'm sure this song was hell on earth to tackle.
It was certainly interesting. First of all, it probably has the most, or had anyway, the most number of tracks that I've ever encountered in a mix session before. So that was an interesting challenge. And actually, towards the end of the mix, my computer started to struggle with its CPU usage based on like the plugins I had on this thing. So it was like, oh shit, like am I even gonna be able to properly export this? But it all turned out all right. For the purposes of this, I've turned off some of the oversampling that some of the plugins were doing.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, and then this was also the first song I've mixed that had screaming vocals before, so that was an interesting thing to take on. However, I do listen to plenty of music that has screaming vocals, so I kind of had an idea of like what I wanted to do, and it turned out really well actually, and with not that much effort, which I'm super
I would
happy
like
about.
to take a moment to thank. I mean, you provided some as well. This was
I did, yes. This was my screaming debut. I just recently, like a month or two ago, found out how to safely scream, and I've always wanted to know how to do that. So I took it upon myself to add my own stuff in addition to the singing vocals that I was already supposed to add on to this, which you'll hear in a bit.
Which thematically all sort of makes sense. The song conceptually is in part about Coos, our faithful, fearless cameraman at the moment, had given me a copy of A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And Eckhart Tolle posits the theory of the pain body in his work, which is essentially those moments in which you become addicted to your own depression and bad feelings. And in order to tear yourself away from that, you're tearing yourself away from this thing that is clawing for its life. And when you're in those headspaces, things that are even good sounding or at least honest sounding can sound distorted and horrifying, which is what the screaming vocals are represented. Your contribution, Chris Smith's contribution, my own to an extent, but mostly Michael Gavaris of the band Enochian. He is the standout velociraptor on this track. The song has three movements, I would say. The first being an introductory movement where the lead vocals are sort of the present thing. sort of setting a narration. It has a second movement which has more motion, like almost like a march, and then a third movement where things just kind of start swirling and upping in intensity, where a chorale arranged by Jake Sachs comes into play, and it's also full of these ridiculous little Maxwell puns that because we just can't have nice things. It's again, we've talked about sincerity, and sincerely having a sense of humor to me is being in touch with myself. So let's look at that first half. Let's see or that first third. Let's see what it was interesting to you, I guess, in there. If we look at, if you want to play part of that.
All right, cool.
So, what's happening here is at one point I just left a guitar on a couch in front of an amplifier.
Yeah, so that stuff is these yellow tracks here. We've got reverse delay, noise, feedback, harmonic tremolo,
which is like almost a guitar riff,
an oscillator, and the black fly pedal. And I have all these things going on super low in the mix, so the channels themselves are at either 0 or like -6 dB, but the bus that they're all going into is at -9 dB, so they're just barely in there. It's like you almost don't know they're there, but like if I took them out, you would notice they're gone. It's that kind of thing,
Oh yeah, well, because they're like the things that start the song, essentially.
Right. But they're always going on in the background.
It's funny that you lump the harmonic tremolo into that, into the weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it just wasn't really giving me a very... I don't know, I didn't see it as like a regular guitar part.
That's fair.
It's not. It's a weird guitar part, hence going into the weird bus. So what I'm doing here is, you might notice them going back and forth. That is what I did, just using Sound Choice Pan Man here, which is a rhythmic automatic panner. Just have it going to one side every measure. And then I just threw a compressor over everything. Oops. It's the UAD Teletronics LA2A. Love this thing. And yeah, so that's the weird bus.
So we have that's pretty weird.
Yep. Starting from the beginning, I'll bring up the drums now.
Drums were performed by Nick Potters.
Yeah. And this was interesting because most of the song doesn't have any cymbals in it, so it's just like kick and snare, right?
Yeah. I wanted him to give it kind of a march, like to give it this sense of motion without being drastic. I wanted it to feel methodical and very sort of plaintive, and that means that the crescendo at the end of the song becomes much more of a highlight.
Yeah. So this is my processing chain for the kick. I love Slate Digital's plugins. They sound fantastic, and I use them on almost every track, really. Kick alone sounds like that. And then I use these Omega Transformer plugins by Kush Audio, who are also great. I just recently started using them. This just adds a little bit of extra meat to it. I think that's the best way I can describe it. The snare sounds like this soloed. Again, using Slate Digital plugins. And then the only other drum track happening right now is the room track that sounds like this. I like to compress the shit out of room tracks and then just like tuck them into the mix, so like it just adds a little something extra.
Yeah, it's like it adds body.
It's another one of those things that like Yeah, I'll take it away for a second. Out. And in.
Yeah,
Right?
you get the overtones.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's what the drums sound like. Now, bass.
Ben, I recorded Ben through my personal pedal board to get sort of this extra strange sort of just to experiment with my Eventide pedals, because I ran him through the H9 to get a different kind of bass overdrive.
Yeah. So without my plugins, it sounded like this. Pretty quiet, right? And then added this Red DI, also by Kush Audio. It's just like a really great bass DI that's been modeled into a plugin. And then some usual bass processing, sorry. And then, this is something I stole from legendary mixer Andy Wallace. I run my bass tracks through this Yamaha SPX 90 right here, through a certain chorus preset, and that sounds like this. Now that's the chorus alone. You hear how like swooshy and wide that is?
Yeah, it's almost like an 80s chorus.
It is.
80s bass chorus.
It is, pretty much.
But it's blended with
the real one.
Yeah.
And that just gives it a little more room, a little more movement.
And in a mix as wet as this, you can barely tell it's there.
Exactly. But if I take it away, you really notice it. Anyway, that's the bass. Well, now the keys.
Also provided by Kuz and by Nick Potters as well.
I love the sounds of these patches, man. I think they just sound so good.
The Mike did his on his microKORG, but what we're hearing here is the Roland Juno, actually, which was doing a lot of sort of theremin-y stuff. I don't even remember some of the patches, but we just sat there, smoked a bunch of weed, and looked for interesting sounding patches.
Yeah. Here's the first one on its own. I love the like old school horror movie vibe it gives, you know?
And it's even got those weird, again, the bird tones.
Yeah. Here's the organ.
Which is doing a lot of 2 chords, actually.
Yeah.
The Zappa chord, if you will.
Here's the one that I labeled Ice. Because...
Ice?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Here's the theremin. Here's the theremin doubled down the octave. And then here's the track that I just labeled Kuz, because it was the only Kuz track. And I actually have him on the pan man as well, so he's rhythmically panning hard left and right every 2 measures. Because you were just doing, like, different stuff all the time, so I'm like, okay, he's just going to be, like, a background thing that, like,
yeah.
you know, like, it's still really cool.
Yeah, because Kuz was running through a monophonic synth. And when he plays, he likes to tweak his parameters while on the singular notes, so it ends up being this consistently morphing texture.
So altogether, that sounds like.
Can we solo the solo?
Which? Oh, the theremin?
Yep. The second movement has a theremin solo by Nick Potters that I wanted to showcase in there, so...
Yeah, I'll start from the beginning of that. Oh, sorry.
Which I'd originally imagined to be a guitar part, and I'd thought about doubling what he had done on guitar. Some days I wish I had, most of the time I don't care. Because this is just... It actually, what it reminds me of is Ashes to Ashes by David Bowie. Like, the end of that song has a lot of this sort of almost melancholic, but still explorative feeling to it, which is kind of appropriate for the second movement of this song. Can you play it in context?
Yeah, sure. So, with everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
And everything is, moving a bit more than it does in the first movement. This is the second movement now.
Yeah.
Where, after the premise has been established, you live with it a bit. It explores the boundary of the premise. And then we hit the third movement. We highlight the guitars at this point. Let's talk about the guitars. We got this nice, pretty part here before the song descends into the riff.
The riff!
Which is like this Lydian. Where it's just kind of like a riff going from the major 7 to the flat 5 to the 5, and then down the octave. With, of course, a little bit of extra crunch. And Leslie.
Just some chugs.
Yeah. Something a little cleaner so that it would cut.
Now together. This is definitely the most guitar tracks I've ever worked with.
And then we have those dive bombs now.
Yep.
The Iron Man.
Yep.
To just kind of add to this intensity. Because at that point, can you go back to those last, right before the drums pick up and just sort of play the drums with the guitar?
Sure.
Because this, to me, was very important. Because the drums kind of explode, and they lean into that emphasis a bit more, and it's a decided crescendo. And so we've got just those extra ways that the intensity starts to build up, and most importantly of all in this would be the war going on at one point. I guess I'll just call it a war between the chorale and the monsters.
All right.
So we've got the monster voices yelling, "Max, be not well." We've got the chorale singing, "All is well, that's Maxwell." And one of them is singing something nice and pretty, and the other one is being a bunch of monsters in the background.
Yep. So let's showcase those, I guess.
Yeah, let's showcase, because this was special for me as a songwriter, because on my last record, on Round of Sound, I did the majority of it myself. Like, Johnny played drums. Every once in a while, John Wall came in and played bass. You contributed some keys. Michael Gilch did keys on Open Up and Round of Sound itself. But generally speaking, I was fairly militant about trying to do as much of it as I could on my own. This song, but this record especially, was really important to me to try and bring as many other people into it as felt appropriate, because if I had tried to do this by myself, the quality of it would have not reached this caliber. Yeah. So I guess we can start with the chorale.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start by showcasing just your vocals.
I sent Jake just sort of a rough idea to go with, and it's wavery, but there was something around it.
Oh, yeah. So this is just Max right now.
All is well, that's Maxwell.
And then he asked me to double him.
All is well, that's Maxwell.
And then I added more harmonies.
All is well, that's Maxwell.
8 voice parts.
Because Jake has experience as a choral director.
Well, no, not a choral director, but choral composer,
Yeah,
acapella arranger.
exactly. You've
Yeah.
done.
I
You've worked with the London Philharmonic.
No, I haven't.
Shut up.
I have sung in England, but not in London. Yeah. So this was especially fun for me because Max and I have known each other for what'll be 17 years in September, and he has contributed guitar to a lot of my music. So to be able to pay him back by finally getting to sing on one of his songs was just really special for me. So I went as hard as I could on the harmonies here, as you can tell.
I gave him free range. I'm like, this is the thing I did. Honor the thing I did and go.
Yep.
You know, and that's exactly what he did. He took the idea and he ran with it in a way that my imagination would have never gone.
Yeah.
And now we have now we have what I believe is really the fucking kingmaker of this song in the monsters.
Yep.
The monsters in our heads. These guys represent, as Mr. Zig Ziglar calls it, stinkin' thinking. And it was very appropriate for me to get in somebody who is qualified to do this, especially. Like, there's a lot of harsh vocals on here, but my friend Sam Bembasudo, the artist behind the drone artwork, the Betamax artwork, she also did the artwork on Annie's Gone, which will be out at some point soon, and Journeys. She introduced me to this guy, Michael Guavaris, and guy's a motherfucker. And he came in and he did, what did I give you? I gave you like 8 tracks of him, like 3 tracks of Chris Smith, like maybe a couple of tracks of myself, which are sort of buried.
Yeah, you gave me 8 tracks of him, all of which I summed into stereo pairs because, like, yeah, it just makes things easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gave me 2 tracks of you.
Yeah.
And then I think it was,
Like,
maybe 3 tracks of Chris.
Yeah, mostly 2 tracks. There was one where he tried something and I didn't care for it, so I had it like muted or just buried.
Yeah, and then I gave you 4 tracks of my own screaming, which I summed into 2 stereo tracks.
So when I tracked Michael, he gave me 2 tracks of 4 different voices. We had highs, mids, lows, and gutturals.
Yep. And I actually ended up muting a lot of them early on in the song. Like, as you can see, I just deleted the highs throughout the entire first movement and then most of the second movement. And then in a lot of places, I like to do this cascading thing. So I have...
Like you have a build.
Mids, and then mids and lows, and then mids, lows, and gutturals. And then here, highs, and then the highs and mids, highs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we went back and forth on which ones I wanted to hear more of where. Because I had very specific ideas of what I needed those monsters to sound like.
Yeah. And then here, on the Max Be Not Well part, which I think we'll play in a second. Right?
Yep.
I start with just Max, Chris, and myself on the first 2 go-arounds, and then I add one Michael every 2 phrases. So eventually, for the last 2, we have everybody. And it's a whole thing.
Because originally it was pretty high. It was that like everybody was coming in real hot at the beginning.
Yeah.
And we decided to have it be a much more gradual build.
Yeah. Well, I always had this build built in, but you asked me to make it more of a volume thing too.
Yeah,
so.
I wanted a more drastic volume build to make it, again, to sort of mirror the way that anxiety perceives for me. which is that it's there, you know it's there, you try to ignore it, but it's kind of like, you know, if you got like a cut on your tongue, you gotta fucking play with it for a while, and you can try to ignore it, but you got that ringing pain, and then you bite your tongue again, and it's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna bite it really hard. So let's hear, let's do, I guess, let's just take us through what some of these tracks sound like.
Yep. I want to go track by track. So, here's just Max.
Max! Be not well!
And I'm just shouting. That's not really...
Max! Be not well!
less about anything good. More about being able to have my own voice beat in this for the symbolic reasons of it's supposed to be inside my head.
And I think it really works. Here's one of the Chris tracks.
Max! Be not well!
Well, two of the Chris tracks, something into one.
Max! Be not well!
Here's the second Chris track.
Max! Be not well.
Just giving me something different there.
Max! Be not well.
Here's the first of me.
Max! Be not well!
Super happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, this was a surprise.
Max! Be not well!
Yeah, I was just late at night mixing this, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to use my newfound screaming ability here.
Yeah, this is the song for that. This is the pile.
And then this thing, I've known how to do for years, but this is the second kind of screaming I contributed.
Max, be not well.
See, it's just because like I wanted it to have a little more low end here.
Be not well.
Before the Michaels came in.
And here they are.
Yep. And then here's the first. Here's the high Michael track.
Max, be not well.
So good.
Yeah, this is Michael is a fucking pro.
Yeah. Here's the Michael mid.
Max, be not well.
Here's the low.
Max, be not well.
And finally the guttural. Yeah. And then all four Michaels together.
Max, be not well.
And then everyone together.
Max, be not well.
And it's no wonder my wife had a panic attack the first time she heard this.
Yeah.
So that's all the stinking thinking.
So that, combined with the sung vocals, sound like this.
You want to throw the bass track in there too?
Sure.
Because I had the bass sort of mirror... Well, Ben just intrinsically mirrored the part. And I really love what he did with that. And then, just to wrap it up, the song ends... After that big climactic thing, it ultimately ends on a perfectly cromulent chord. It just ends on just an E major.
Well, yeah, I also held out my vocals a little bit towards the end, but and you sort of hear that. But...
Yeah, but just the resolution.
Yeah. So, here's...
You want to give me... Yep. And you can sort of hear again, you still have all the bird voicings and all the other stuff that was ambient. The song is called Drone because it drones on that E, and it resolves tumultuously, but ultimately in a peaceful way, going back to that E major.
Yeah. Then you still have the weird stuff swirling about at the very end, and that's actually the only thing that's going at the very end of the song.
Yeah, and just kind of the dust settling. And there you have it. That's Drone. This is the first track off Betamax, and you can hear that on TLN Records. Stick around. Judge Judy at noon.
Dude.